Mom, please wake up.
Don't leave us.
Mom, I need you. Please.
Don't leave us.
Mom, I need you.
She
Please.
didn't say goodbye. She didn't call any of us. She didn't leave a letter on the kitchen counter or ask the nurse to dial our numbers. She just went. And the most devastating part of this entire story is not the moment she died. It is the moment I realized she had been preparing to die for months, completely alone, in a house in Columbus, Ohio, while I was 1,000 miles away living my life like we had all the time in the world. My name is Michael, and this is the true story of the last 90 days of my mother's life. The secret she carried by herself, the conversation I kept putting off, and the 7 words she said to me in a hospital room that I will never, for as long as I live, be able to get out of my head. Before we go any further into this story, and I promise you, you will want to stay for every single minute of it, drop a comment right now and let us know where you're watching from. We have people watching this from all across the country, and we would love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because what I am about to share with you tonight is something I have never said out loud to anyone outside of this camera. Her name was Dorothy Jean Calloway. Everyone who loved her called her. She was 68 years old, and she was, without question, the strongest woman I have ever known in my life. She was raised in a small town outside of Columbus, the daughter of a coal miner and a schoolteacher, and she came up in a household where you did not complain, you did not ask for help, and you did not burden other people with your problems. That was the world that shaped her, and for most of her life, it served her well. She raised 3 children, my older brother Raymond, my younger sister Carol, and me, largely on her own after our father left when I was 11. She worked 2 jobs for 4 years without once letting us know how close to the edge we were. She put food on the table, kept the lights on, showed up to every single parent-teacher conference, and still found a way to have Sunday dinner on the table at 2 o'clock without fail. She was, by every measure, a woman who had earned the right to be celebrated. And in the summer of 2022, that is exactly what we thought we were doing. Raymond had organized a family reunion for the 4th of July weekend, the first time all 3 of us had been back in Columbus at the same time in over 4 years. Mom cooked for 2 days straight. She made her potato salad, her deviled eggs, her famous lemon cake. She laughed all weekend. She danced in the backyard with her grandchildren. And when I hugged her goodbye on that Sunday afternoon and told her I'd call her next week, she held on a little longer than usual. I noticed it. I told myself it meant nothing. I was wrong. What none of us knew, what she had deliberately made sure we would not know, was that 6 weeks before that 4th of July cookout, my mother had received a phone call from her doctor's office. She had gone in for what she described to everyone around her as a routine appointment. A follow-up. Nothing to worry about. But the call that came after was not routine. The results of her biopsy had come back. The mass her doctor had been monitoring in her abdomen for the past 3 months had changed. And the word her oncologist used on that phone call, the word that changed everything, was aggressive. Stage 3 colorectal cancer. A diagnosis that, with treatment, was survivable. But treatment meant surgery. It meant chemotherapy. It meant telling her children. And Dorothy Jean Calloway, the woman who had spent her entire adult life making sure her children never felt the weight of her burdens, made a decision that afternoon that she would carry this one alone too. She hung up the phone. She went to her kitchen. She made herself a cup of coffee. And she sat at the table she had sat at for 31 years, in the house she had lived in since before Raymond was born, and she decided, quietly, privately, completely, that she was not going to tell us. In the weeks that followed, she did not disappear. She did not become distant or strange. If anything, she became more present. She called Carol more often. She started sending cards in the mail again, actual paper cards with little notes written inside in her looping handwriting. She asked me once, out of nowhere on a Wednesday evening phone call, if I was happy. Not how was work, not how was the house, not how were the kids. Just, are you happy? I told her yes, and moved on to some story about something at work. I did not think to ask her the same question back. I did not ask why she was asking. I assumed it was just mom being mom, sentimental in the way that women of her generation sometimes got as they got older. It did not occur to me, not for one single second, that she was building a memory, that she was saying things she needed to say before she ran out of time to say them. She had told one person, one, Her neighbor and closest friend of 22 years, a woman named Beverly, who lived 3 houses down on Elmwood Drive and who had been bringing up casseroles and driving her to doctor's appointments since August. Beverly knew everything. She had sat with my mother through every oncology consultation, held her hand during the first chemotherapy infusion in September, and driven her home afterward and stayed until my mother fell asleep on the couch. Beverly had sworn an oath to keep the secret, and she honored it. For 3 months, she honored it. Right up until the night in November, when she picked up her phone at 11:30 and called Raymond's number with her hands shaking, and said 8 words that none of us had any framework to process. "Your mother is in the hospital. You need to come." Raymond called me first. I remember exactly where I was, sitting in my home office in Charlotte, North Carolina, a Tuesday night, watching something on television I cannot recall. My phone lit up and I saw his name, and I almost let it go to voicemail. I am ashamed to say that. I almost let my brother's call go to voicemail because I was comfortable. I picked up on the third ring. He told me what Beverly had told him. He told me Mom had been admitted to St. Vincent Medical Center. He told me Beverly said it was serious. And I remember my actual first thought, was that it was probably a fall. Old people fell. Mom had been stubborn about putting that mat in the bathroom for years. I told Raymond I would book a flight in the morning. He told me to book it tonight. Something in his voice made me stop arguing. I booked it that night. I landed in Columbus at 6:15 in the morning. Raymond picked me up from the airport. He did not say much in the car. We got coffee from a drive-thru and sat in the parking garage of the hospital for 4 minutes without talking. I do not know why 4 minutes specifically. I remember looking at the clock when we got there and again when we got out. Then we went inside. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was the longest elevator ride of my life. When the doors opened and I walked down that hallway and turned the corner and saw my mother's room number on the door, room 412, I felt something shift in my chest. The kind of shift that does not shift back. Carol was already there. She had driven up from Cincinnati the night before. She met us in the hallway with red eyes and told us the doctor wanted to speak with us before we went in. We stood in a small family consultation room with a man named Dr. Marcus Ellison, who had the manner of someone who had delivered terrible news many times and had learned how to do it gently without making it soft. He told us about the cancer. He told us it had been diagnosed in June. He told us about the 3 months of chemotherapy. And then he told us what the scans from the previous week had shown, that the cancer had spread to her liver and that the chemotherapy was no longer achieving what they had hoped. He used the word comfort. He said they were shifting to comfort-focused care. Raymond asked what that meant. Dr. Ellison said it meant they were no longer treating the cancer. They were treating my mother. I did not fully understand what that meant until I walked into room 412 and saw her face. She looked small. That is the only word I have for it, even now. My mother, who had always taken up so much good space in every room she entered, not because she was loud or demanding, but because she was simply, completely, undeniably present, looked small in that bed. She had lost weight I had not noticed on FaceTime because she always turned on the lamp behind her when we video called. The light was flattering, and I had never questioned it. I questioned it now. But when she saw the 3 of us walk through that door, something came back into her eyes. She pushed herself up against the pillow. She tried to joke. She said, "Well, this is not how I planned to get all 3 of you in the same room." Raymond laughed. Carol cried. I stood at the foot of the bed, and I did not do either. I just looked at her. And she looked at me. And in that look was everything that had not been said between us in 30 years of phone calls that were 3 minutes when they should have been 30. The next 4 days were the most complete days I have ever spent in my life, and I know how strange that sounds given the circumstances. We barely left that floor of the hospital. We took turns sitting with her, talking with her, watching whatever she wanted on the television mounted on the wall. She watched her game shows in the afternoon and asked Carol to do her nails, and told Raymond a story about his father that none of us had ever heard before. She talked more in those 4 days than I could remember her talking in years. It was like she had been storing things up, and now the clock was running, and she was not going to let anything remain unsaid. Except for one thing. She never explained why she had not told us. Not directly. Not in so many words. On the second night, when Raymond and Carol had gone down to the cafeteria, and it was just the 2 of us, I asked her. I said, "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" And she was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I thought she might not answer. And then she said, because I know what watching someone suffer does to people. And I wasn't going to do that to my kids. I did not have an answer for that. I still do not. On the morning of the fourth day, her breathing changed. The nurses had told us it would. They had described, with a clinical gentleness I will always be grateful for, what the final stages of her body's process would look like. They called it a pattern, a rhythm the body falls into when it is preparing to let go. I was in the chair beside her bed when it started. Raymond was standing by the window. Carol was holding her left hand. I was holding her right. And I want you to understand something about that moment, about watching someone you love move through the last minutes of their life, because I think we get it wrong in the stories we tell. We expect it to feel like a scene from a movie. We expect music and lighting and some profound final word that wraps everything up. It does not feel like that. It feels like being in a very quiet room with someone who is slowly moving somewhere you cannot follow. It feels like standing at the edge of something you cannot see past. Her breathing slowed and slowed. And then, at 8:47 in the morning on November 17th, it stopped. And the room did not erupt. Nobody screamed. The monitor went flat and made a sound that was nothing like what you hear on television. It was quieter, more final. And the three of us just sat there in the silence that followed, and none of us moved for a very long time. I flew back to Charlotte 4 days later. I went back to work the following Monday because I did not know what else to do with myself. I answered emails and sat in meetings and nodded at the right times, and when people asked how I was doing, I said I was fine. That is what men of my generation do. We say we are fine. We close the door. We hold the weight in the chest where nobody can see it, and we tell ourselves that being functional is the same thing as being okay. It is not. Grief is not something you schedule around. I learned that the hard way, about 6 weeks after she died, standing in a grocery store in Charlotte in front of a display of Jiffy cornbread mix, the kind my mother always bought, and I could not move. I stood in that aisle for 4 minutes, and a woman asked me twice if I was all right, and I could not answer her. That was where it caught up to me. Not at the funeral, not at the hospital. In a grocery store in front of a cardboard display. That is where I finally cried. What I carry now, the thing that does not leave me, is not regret about the big moments. It is not regret about the missed holidays or the canceled visits, or even the fact that she spent 3 months going through chemotherapy alone while I called her once a week and talked for 8 minutes and thought I was being a good son. The regret I carry is smaller and heavier than any of that. It is the Tuesday phone call I made 3 minutes long when I had 30 minutes to give. It is the FaceTime call where she looked tired and I noticed, and I said nothing. It is the night she asked me if I was happy, and I answered without asking her back. We are not told, not by our fathers, not by the culture we grew up in, to have the conversations that feel unnecessary until they are impossible. We are told to work, to provide, to stay strong. We are not told that staying present is the greatest act of love there is. That showing up, not for the big moments, but for the ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday moments, is the whole thing. It is the whole thing. And I learned that too late. But here's what I also know. My mother knew what she was doing. She had thought about it, and she had chosen it, and she had protected us in the only way she knew how. Whether that was right or wrong is not a question I am qualified to answer. What I know is that she loved us with everything she had, right up to the last breath she took in room 412 of St. Vincent Medical Center on a November morning while her 3 children sat beside her. She was not alone, and she was not afraid. Beverly told us later that my mother had said, in their last real conversation 3 days before she was admitted, that the only thing she needed to know before she was ready was that her kids were going to be all right. Beverly told her yes, and my mother nodded and said, "Good. Then I'm not worried." She was not worried. She was ready. I was not. You never are. If you still have your mother, please hear this. Not as a lesson, not as advice, just as something true from a man who learned it the hard way. Call her this week. Not a text, a call. And when she asks how you are, ask her back. Ask her how she really is. Ask her what she is afraid of, and what she is proud of, and what she wishes she had done differently. Ask her the questions that feel too big for a Tuesday. Because it is always a Tuesday until it isn't. And then it is too late. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Tell me about your mother. Tell me what you wish you had said. Tell me if you are carrying something you haven't put down yet. Because you are not alone in this room. And next week, I'm going to take you into what happened after, what losing her did to our family, to the relationships between the 3 of us, and the one phone call that changed everything 6 weeks after the funeral. Subscribe so you do not miss it. I will see you then.